John on his team. John has been incredibly dedicated to the chapter. Not a lot of you know this, but the story that John told in the beginning about taking the young child to the emergency room, they weren't sick. John just took them there because he thought it'd be a good story for the presentation. That's how dedicated he was. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about kind of what staffing firms are doing, getting ready for the Affordable Care Act, and what we know and what we don't know. And unfortunately, as Aaron said, there's a lot more that we don't know or don't have a full handle on than what we do know. But here are the basics. We know that in 7 months from today, on January 1st, or 8 months from today, on January 1st, 2014, the employer shared provision of the Affordable Care Act will go into place, which means if you are considered a full-time, if you are considered a large employer, which means you have 50 or more full-time equivalent employees, you will either have to provide qualifying coverage or you'll have to pay a penalty. And the 50 number, the full-time equivalent term, the 50 number, is only used when you're looking at this. It's only to get through the door to see if you're a large employer. Now, by our count, 90% plus of staffing firms will be considered large employers because of the full-time equivalent definition. And what you're going to do to determine if you are a full-time, if you are a large employer, somewhere, but I'll just kind of walk you through it. You're going to do look at a calendar year, and you're going to take all your full-time internal staff and you're going to run them down one column, do it by month. And then you're going to take all the hours worked by anybody who didn't work for you full-time. So if you've got part-time on your internal staff, you count those hours in. You count all the hours of your contract employees that you send out. You take that total number and you divide that by 120, and you're going to get a full-time equivalent number for the people that didn't work for you full-time. You add those two numbers up, that's your monthly figure. You do it 12 times, you divide by 12. If that number's over 50, you're going to be a full-time, you're going to be a large employer per the statute. So if you've got 10 people in your office, then you have to think about the fact that all you're going to need is 40 full-time equivalent employees a month to get to that number. Not a big hurdle to clear at all. Again, only time we use the term full-time equivalent is with this. The control group test for this part is you count everybody. So if you have 8 offices, you count everybody in the 8 offices. Even if it's, Malara Staffing LLC and we have 8 branches in Virginia, we're going to have to count everybody and add them up for this part. So there's that test. We talked about this. Now, once you determine that you're a large employer, now your key factor is how many full-time employees do I have? Because full-time employees are the only employees that you care about when determining the penalty. Okay? And there's one way to define full-time employee, but there's different ways to measure it. The statute defines a full-time employee as anybody who works 30 hours or more each week in a month. And because of the way that the months break out, that number in aggregate is 130. So anybody that works 130 hours a month is determined as a full-time employee. Now, when that language came out in the law and it was passed, we as an association formed a coalition, we started working on the regulations, and we went up to the Treasury Department and we said to them, we cannot as an industry, and this was staffing in restaurants and retail, we cannot as industries who have heavy hourly usage of employees spend every month tracking every hour for everybody that works for us. We will never get anything done. We need some sort of a measurement period so we can kind of gather up the hours. Because the other thing is, as we explained to them, and this is really kind of what got the hook to them, was if you do this on a monthly basis, you're going to have people every single month going out of the exchange, going back in the exchange, or going on an employer's health plan, having to come off an employer's health plan. It's not fair to the employee, it's certainly not fair to the employer, it'll drive the marketplace crazy. And that's where the basic look-back provision came from. And the look-back provision is that you take 52 weeks, your whole year. You can look back to a year at your employees, count up their hours. They have to work 30 hours a week. 30 times 52 is 1,560. They work 1,560 hours in a year. They will be considered a full-time employee, which means the following year, as long as they remain employed with you, you'll either have to pay a penalty for them or you'll have to put them in your plan. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, and we'll talk about that in a second, because the first year it will be. Okay, so on January 1, 2014, and I always wondered why they made it January. That's how obnoxious they were. No one's going to go into work on January 1 to do this. I mean, everyone's going to be more hungover than usual because they're going to be thinking about this all night on the 31st. So January 2nd, people are going to go into work and they're going to start looking at these numbers. You're going to look back to 2013. You're going to count all the hours for the people that work for you. Anybody that worked for you for more than 1,560 hours will be considered an ongoing full-time employee for 2014, which means you'll either, at that point, either have to start paying a monthly fee or put them in your plan. If you have a plan, you have up to 3 months to enroll them per your plan document and structure. If you don't have a plan, if you're paying a penalty, that's going to start right away. Again, you'll then be measuring on a monthly basis. When you get to that point, you have to make sure that they do work for you. Now, the key thing is, you're going to do this on a monthly basis. That doesn't mean you're going to necessarily pay for it on a monthly basis. We don't know yet how they're going to come down on it. We know that you will have to track this on a monthly basis for some employees. But if you're wondering if you're going to have to pay this every month, we don't know. Our thought is it's either going to be an annual payment, possibly a quarterly payment. But that's one of the things that we don't know yet because they haven't told us. So, as Aaron talked about, if you don't offer coverage to all your employees, you're going to have to pay $166.67 per month for every full-time employee minus the first 30. And that doesn't matter if they've got coverage from somewhere else. That doesn't matter if they don't want coverage. That's just everybody. Add them all up. That's what you got. If you offer coverage, and we used to have to say if it was minimum essential coverage and minimum value and qualified, but now, as Aaron touched on, the past 4 or 5 weeks, there's been a development that employers, and there's actually been some talk about these plans being put together, these wellness and prevention plans, which will have to meet certain criteria in the Public Health Service Act, which is referenced in ERISA, which is referenced in the Affordable Care Act. It's going to be a bucket of probably 4 to 5 things that will have to be offered. If you offer minimum essential coverage, it doesn't have to meet minimum value. That's the way that we've been told. If your employees don't take that, then you go down to the 49AHB penalty, which is only getting a penalty for people to go down to the exchange and get a coverage. And here's why this is important. If you don't offer coverage at all your full-time employees, you're going to have to pay the $167 a month fee. If you offer coverage, now you're only on the tab for people that go down to the exchange and get the coverage. And there's probably 2 or 3 main groups there. Group number 1 that Aaron talked about, the people that even with the subsidies and even with the government help are going to look at they're going to look at the statement and they're going to say, you know what, this is wonderful that I get this plan for $500 a year, but I'd rather pay the $95 penalty and go to the emergency room I have to or wait till I get sick. So those people aren't going to go down the exchange, or they're going to go down the exchange and change their mind and not get the coverage. You don't worry about them. Anybody who's married and has coverage through a spouse, anybody who's retired and has a retirement health care plan, anybody who's on Medicaid, anybody who, I'm running out of examples, anybody at all, anybody that's covered by somebody else. Oh, this is the 4th one. The Affordable Care Act raised the child dependency age to 26. So if you've got somebody that's 23, 24 years old living at home with their parents and they're on their parent insurance plan, They can't go down to the exchange. So all those people will be cut out of your monthly tax tab. It will only be those that go down to the exchange. And remember, the tax is an excise tax. It's written in statute and referred to as an excise tax, which means it's bottom line tax, non-deductible. So it is a big number in and of itself, a bigger number. And we ran the numbers, and you know, you should never trust lawyers to run numbers, but we came up with something in the neighborhood of, for every $2,000 penalty that you have to collect for a full-time employee that you don't offer coverage to, you would have to get back from your client somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,700 because of the way that the money is taxed and the way that it comes in. And again, that's assuming you're probably at the top of the tax bracket. But nonetheless, that number's not going to differ too much. It's not just getting back dollar for dollar. It's getting back that and then the increase of what you pay for it. So it's a little tricky. So we talked about the employee eligible for subsidies. They have to be offered, not offered a plan or offered a plan that's unaffordable. Key point here on unaffordability. If you offer them a plan, the employee is going to have their affordability based on the cost of their share of the monthly premium of a single-only plan. Now, the statute says that you have to offer a family plan, but the test for affordability is based on the single-only plan. And while that may not make sense in South Carolina or in any other place in the United States of America, in Washington, D.C., it makes perfect sense because they had to do it that way in order to score it the way they did. And that, you know, for those of you who have a life and didn't spend years of learning about the Affordable Care Act and watching it go through Congress, the big deal was that they had to get it to a certain number through the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office. And so this structure is important to know because it's based on the single-only plan, even though you have to offer a group plan. So we talked a little bit about the look-back provision. The measuring period can be 3, 6, or 12 months. We're going to assume that every staffing firm is going to use a 12-month look-back period because obviously that gives you the biggest window to play with. Now, the flip side of that, or the corollary to that, is that what they used to call the substantiation period, which is now going to just be called the coverage period, has got to equal the measurement period. So you can't say I'm going to have a 12-month look back but only cover somebody for 3 months. They won't let us do that. So if you use a 12-month look back, you have to have a 12-month coverage period. And during that period, you have to pay a penalty or put somebody in the plan of your employees that works full-time as long as they work for you. Which means this: if they go for a month and they don't work for you, you don't have to pay for them. Okay? If they hit a year anniversary, or it's quite likely that, let's say, somebody hits 1,560 hours for you working January through November, and then they leave, and they're not with you in December, and then so the next period starts in January, and they're not with you, there's going to be a break in service rule, which we'll talk about, which will let you know whether or not you have to carry those people over. But if they don't work for you in January, you don't have to pay for them because they have to be working for you. Now, we tried to get a minimum work requirement, and they said no. So it is literally 1 hour a month for somebody who's in your coverage period you'd have to pay for. So that's going to take a little bit of finesse with your clients when you're dealing with that. So there's a difference between ongoing and variable employees. The ongoing employees are going to be the group of employees that you initially measure on January 1st of 2014. And that's when you're going to do the whole look back and just count it at 1,560. After that, you're going to start with new employees, and you're going to start getting into variable hour and non-variable hour employees, which is going to be key to the look back. But for just this point, let's just say, anybody that starts working for you after January 1st will be a new employee. And their anniversary date will be the date that you use to measure their full-time equivalent, their full-time test. Because the thought process was, if you had somebody that started for you on February 1st, we'll take the extreme example. They work for you that whole year, but they don't quite get to 1560. So you do the look back, they're not a full-time employee. Then they'll literally have to work a whole other 12 months to get to another look back, which means if you did just a calendar-only look back, you could be in a position where somebody could be working for you full-time for 23 months without getting coverage. So the IRS was insistent that you needed to do the test on a higher date basis. Probably in the scheme of things, not the worst thing in the world, considering the way that we are with hours and tracking and I-9s and all that other employment documents that we have to track based on higher date. So we talked about ongoing employees. That's going to be the people that work for you as of January 1, 2014. Now, we've also heard from folks in the IRS, and we're waiting to get some sort of, there's a lot of stuff we've heard that we're fine with. We've worked with these people, we know where they're coming from. We go talk to some HR people, and HR people don't like gray areas. Compliance people don't like like legal people do. When you say like gray area to Ed, he gets all excited because that's like great, we love it. So one of the things that they've told us is, first of all, the thing we can guarantee you is that enforcement of this is going to be pretty lax in the beginning, as far as coming down hard. They're going to enforce it. They're going to be looking to make sure that people are making a best effort. But they're going to be pretty forgiving for the first couple of years because they've done such a poor job of kind of rolling this out. So one of the things they're going to do is it's the look back that you do at the beginning of 2015 is probably going to be pretty similar to the one you do in 2014, where you're just going to look back and count all the hours. And that's important because that's not the way that they kind of structured the look back when we talked about it. And what we talked about is the proposed rules that are the rules that will be in place until they issue the final rules, which will be sometime after the law is implemented, because why wouldn't you issue final rules after the law goes into effect, will be in effect until then. And what they say is you can only use the look back period for variable hour employees. And variable hour employees are defined as, well, they're not really defined. They're kind of like, they may work for you, they may not, you don't know. They can work full-time when they work, but we're not really sure. It's a very subjective test. And one of the things they did in trying to put a little bit more meat on the bones was come up with these examples. So this is actual language in the proposed rule, which says that the staffing firms in the beginning will have to figure out, when you hire somebody, do you think they're a variable hour employee? Will they be offered short-term assignments with different clients and significant gaps in between? Now, of course, all the quotes we have no, that's just, there's no definitions there. There's no like cross definitions. So what's significant gap? I don't know. What's short-term? We don't know. But we know this much. If somebody calls you and says they need somebody for a 9-month assignment, they're not going to be a variable hour employee. They're going to be a full-time employee, a non-variable employee that you're going to have to track their monthly hours to see if they fit the penalty. Now, there's a difference between that and a difference between somebody calling you up and saying, I got this project, I need somebody, I don't know, it could be for 4 months, 8 months, with this weather, good Lord, it could last 10 months. Now, in situations like that, there is a real argument that can be made that might be a variable hour employee. And that's the problem with this threshold, is that it's very subjective. So we're looking to get more kind of flushed out information. Now, this was another example that the IRS gave where they didn't mention the staffing firm, but it actually is is almost like you know, Dusty Rhodes in a mask. You know it's Dusty Rhodes, you just can't see his face. This is like a staffing firm with a mask on. So they say employees are hired on an hourly basis to fill in for absent employees and provide staffing at peak times. The employee weekly hours will average 30 hours or more for the first few months of a specific project. And they expect the assignment lengths and gaps will be unpredictable. And you know what? You may have something for them and they may not be available either. Well, that's not staffing. I don't know what is. But so it's going to be very much in the beginning a kind of touchy-feely, we think maybe this is what it looks like. We're going to have a better idea of what non-variable hour employees are. And they're the ones that are going to have the long assignments, the 9-month assignments. So this is what we know. Anything from 3 months to less is going to be a variable hour employee, because if you have a plan, you're not going to put them in your plan during that time frame anyways. So 3 months or less, variable hour. Let's say, you know, 9 months or more, they're not going to be variable hour. 8 months, probably not. 7, maybe not. 6, we'll see. 4 to 5, that's more on the variable hour scale. So what they're looking to prevent long-term assignments from being put in. So the thing is that you are not going to be able to every year just run all your employees through this test if you honestly think that they are not a variable hour employee. So they need to be variable hour, and then you can do the look back on them. Now, if you're going to ask me in question and answer how they're going to audit this, I'm going to save you the time and the effort of raising your hand by telling you I have no idea how they're going to audit this. I mean, short of somebody coming in and saying, well, here's an assignment request form that says 10 months, you know that's a non-variable position, shame on you. Short of something like that, because again, if somebody comes in from the IRS and says, we think that Aaron's a non-variable hour employee, he worked at that company for 9 months, and you say, yeah, it was a 3-month assignment, and then what happened was that he was covering for somebody on maternity leave, and then she extended and took family medical leave for another 2.5 months, and then she could decide if she wanted to come back to work, and then she realized she'd have to stay at home with the little kid, and then she came back to work, and that's why it was 9 months, and these are the factors, and we didn't know that at the time, and how do you fight that? We don't know. And there's going to be situations like that before that. Now, before we wrap up here, there's going to be a couple of kind of like pratfalls or avoidance schemes or things like that we're going to talk about, because you're going to get, if you haven't already, you're going to be like the popular girl that breaks up right before the prom with her boyfriend. You're going to get lots of phone calls from clients, and they're all going to want you to do, boy, that analogy's not really the best analogy. Okay, anyway, so you got to be careful about the clients that are calling you and thinking that you're going to be this great help to them to avoid ACA issues, because there are some problems there. And here's one of the problems that you all need to think about as you move forward with this. Cutting somebody off at 1,550 hours or 1,500 hours for the sole purpose of avoiding having them be a full-time employee is probably going to get you into trouble. It may not get you in trouble with the ACA because there's no real provision in there that talks about this, but you're going to probably be in violation of ERISA. You're going to probably be in violation of some other labor laws that are going to come down. So it's not a good idea to have a system built in, and we know, not our friends at Essential Staff Care, but we know that other people have said things and have put out pieces that said that they've developed an online module for their clients for insurance and tracking purposes, and they're going to put in a number like 1480, and once you try to assign somebody, it's going to basically set up this red stop screen and say, don't send this employee out. They're going to, they're soon approaching 1,560 hours. That's probably going to get you into trouble. We talked about breaks of service rule. So breaks of service is basically going to start the clock over on an employee and move them, if they're in the coverage period, move them back to the measurement period. And there's 2 breaks of service rules that are referenced. The first is 26 consecutive weeks with no hours of service. It's a little more than half a year. So if you got somebody who's gone for 6.5 months and they come back, they're going to start over, either in counting your hours, or if they're in the coverage period, you're going to basically be allowed to treat them as a new hire and send them back to the beginning of the line. Or if they have a break of at least 4 weeks that is longer than the prior assignment. So again, a 3-week assignment followed by a 6-week break. We're not even sure where they really came up with that, but they did. So if you're members of ASA, on our website, by the way, if you're TSC-CSP certified, having sat through this for the past 2 hours, please call and claim credit, because you will get credit for this seminar today. If you are a member, after you get your credit, go on to the legal legislative page. The ACA ASA calculator is a new tool that we've rolled out. It's got a pay or play feature. It's, I think, 21 questions. You fill them out. You know, it's got a PDF form, so you can hand it to your HR folks if you need to gather some information. You plug in the numbers, and it will give you various cost scenarios. And then we talked about the. We're going to go. We're going to send these slides out so you can all have these and talk more about them. I want to get to what we're talking about with, you know, what were called compliance issues. There were 2 compliance issues that were raised in the IRS proposed rules. The first one is you have staffing firm A and staffing firm B. They're both at client C. They have 5 people there. Staffing firm A takes the 5 people for 3 days. Staffing firm B takes the 5 employees for 2 days, and then every week they just shift them back and forth. So every week somebody gets them for 3, the other gets them for 2, and then they switch back and forth. What does this mean? It means that neither A nor B gets credited every week with 30 hours of service. Therefore, nobody is the full-time employer for these employees, and they're nobody's responsibility. The IRS has said, don't try that, because we'll look and we'll catch you and we will punish you severely. And don't try to get the client involved either with some sort of crazy 3rd-party, 3-party, that's a 6-party arrangement, I guess. Don't try to do that, because we'll get you for that. And the problem is this responsibility for providing coverage or paying the penalty is only attributable to the common law employer. Now, we've had a long history in our industry of having the staffing firm be recognized as the common law employer. What the IRS is saying is, if you try any of these silly games, we won't say that you're the common law employer. The other scenario is if you have what the hour split between the things. The other situation that we talked about, you have a client that calls you and says, okay, it's August 1st, and you know, this thing's coming in 4 months, and I'm at 68 people. I'm going to send 25 of my people over to you, and I know you're going to have to pay, so we'll work out what fee that I have to, you know, an additional hourly rate, but we'll put all those people on your payroll. That way I'm under 50 and I'm fine, and again, we'll come up with a figure that I'll pay for the people that I'm sending over to you, and then just turn them back over to me. That is not going to work. They're going to be looking for that. They're going to be looking for that hard. Now, the second question, which was probably, hopefully, more to what the people in the quotes that Aaron showed were thinking, was this, and we feel like this is a totally plausible scenario. One of your clients calls you up and says, you know, I've been thinking about this, you know, ACA, you know, gosh, we're at 45 employees, but, you know, it's not going to take long, you know, before we're up over 50. So I don't want to hire anybody full time. I just, you know, from now on, I'm just going to hire all my people through you. And if you can't find somebody, you know, refer me to, you know, another staffing firm in the association, because that's what I want to do. We don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I mean, that is a business decision that rises above trying to avoid ACA compliance, or the case could be made easier than the other way, is the question. The other question before we wrap up and get to Q&A, or the other statement is, how many folks here do payrolling? any kind of payrolling at all. Okay, we need to be careful about payrolling. We don't know yet what's going to come of it, but we know this. We are fairly confident that PEOs who have never been treated as a common law employer will not be treated as a common law employer for the Affordable Care Act. And the PEOs will be the first people to tell you that they will not be treated as the common law employer, because they want to do two things. They, A, do not want to be responsible for all those people for health care, and B, they've got language in the bill which says that when you're dealing with a PEO, a client has to count the number of people with the PEO to keep their small business exception for various tax credits in the bill, which they are fine with, meaning they don't have to, small business doesn't have to count all the PEOs, just the people assigned from the PEO to them. So they're fine with that, but that also sets up a scenario where the clients of the PEO are going to be responsible for the health care costs of their employees, both on their payroll and that are sent to them through a PEO. Obviously that's not the case with the staffing firm. So you've got staffing firm over here where it's black and white, we're the employer, common law employer, making the argument, we'll pay it, we'll take care of it, we gotta figure it out. You got PEOs over here, they're like, nope, nothing to do with it, go look at them over there. And then right in the middle you have payrolling, where it's not really PEO, it's not really staffing. Most people that we know that do payrolling don't do all that much of it. They either do it for a specific client, or there's been a couple of instances, and there's very legitimate instances where people have retired from companies and that because of their pension plan rules, they can't go back, but they're still working on projects. So just to end this on a completely confusing note, because that's what our goal is here today, just kind of be careful as you move forward with payrolling arrangements, because we don't know yet how they're going to be seen by the IRS. And they may have to come to a fact where you go back to these people and say, they're going to be your responsibility. But you don't have to do that yet because we don't know. So I think that's all I've got. I think we'll probably now